discovered by approaching monsters, and from the air, Vizoran on his wyvern. Wyvern. Harold magics a tandem flying broomstick, and the two of them successfully bring down Vizoran, though at the cost of Belphoebe's falling and being lost to Vizoran's monsters. Harold, still airborne, scouts the landscape searching for Belphoebe. We now begin at Chapter 10, page 177.
An hour of cruising showed him a clearing with a little garden, a thatched cottage, and a circular palisade of pointed stakes around the whole. He helixed down slowly. A man came out of the wood and entered the palisade through a gate. Shay caught a glimpse of red face and black beard as his own shadow, whisking across the grass, brought the man's eyes upward. The man dashed into the cottage as if all the fiends of hell were after him. In a moment, 2 armored men came out. The shield of one bore the striking black and silver girony of Sir Campbell.
By oak, ashen dew, my broomstick true, like a leaf descending, so softly fall you.
That was not quite the right way to put it, as Shay immediately learned. The broom settled slowly but remorselessly literal, carried the imitation of a dead leaf to the point of a dizzying whirl. Cottage, forest, and waiting nights came to him in a spinning blur. Shay felt the ground under his feet. He staggered dizzily. Artegall roared.
Who's Artegall?
By your lady, 'tis the enchanter's varlet.
His sword came out. Wheep!
Ah, you're just the man I'm looking for.
That I warrant.
His laugh was a nasty bark.
But you will accomplish no more magician's tricks on me. I have a protection, which is more than you have against this.
He shook the sword and swung it back.
Wait a minute. I can explain, honest.
Explain to the devils of hell, where you soon will be.
At that moment, Britomart and Cambina came out of the cabin. Shay wondered frantically whether to run toward them, try to start the broom, or... what was that? A set of little patterns was faintly visible on Artegall's breastplate as he turned in the morning sun. They were the type of pattern that would be left by soldering on brass oak leaves and then prying them off.
Hey, you're the guy who showed up in the oak leaves at Saturane's tournament and won second prize, but didn't stop to collect it.
Huh? How know you? What mean you, rogue?
Just what I say. You fought for the challengers, and Britomart knocked you off your pony, didn't she?
'Tis to be said. Ah!
Artegall turned his scowl on Britomart. She glared back.
Come, good friends, no variance. I proclaim it was Sir Artegall, for I penetrated his disguise. Come, Artegall, confess. You cannot hide the sun at the bottom of a bucket.
I suppose I must. I did but wish to make proof whether I were as strong in the lists as I seemed, or whether certain of the knights would rather fall off their horses than oppose the Queen's justiciar.
He turned
You
to
have a
Britomart.
You have a rude way toward an affianced husband, my lady.
Shay caught Britomart's eye and winked violently. She turned on Artegall a look that would have melted granite.
Laura?
Britomart?
Sorry, I thought it was on. Ah, my dear lord, Had I but known, yet surely you shall feel no shame at that one overthrow, for 'twas the combination of that enchanted ebony spear I bear and your own horse's stumbling, neither alone sufficient.
She reached for his mailed arm.
When we wed, I shall leave these broils and tournaments to you.
Campbell and Cambina looked at Britomart, then at each other. The look implied that they had never seen her act that way before. Shay repressed a grin. The brawny blonde learned fast.
Why, dearest dame, that were a great sacrifice indeed. I knew not you cared so. But we have here a most villainous young rascal.
No rascal, but a true and loyal squire, whom I have sworn to my service, and that of the queen.
Then what of his soaring through the sky like a bug or witch? Nay, he's of the tribe of enchanters.
Not so. His magic is white, even as my own, and my art tells me that this Harold de Shay will speak the truth if you'll let him.
Artegall scowled.
Then what's the truth he would speak?
Shay told his story quickly before a new argument could start.
That is good truth, I guarantee, and Belphebe is in deadly danger.
Then why stand we here at words? Ho, woodcutter! We start at once, food and horses, as soon as they may be had, for all of us.
Shay disapproved of this cavalier treatment, but didn't feel called upon to comment. He said,
Going to collect an army?
Nay, not I. Time presses us too close. Here we must count on our own good arms, and Cambina's magic. Art afraid?
Try me.
There's a stout younker. I will be just, and admit I held you wrong.
the moon in this world, Shay observed, set only 12 or 13 minutes later each night, instead of the 50 minutes later of his own Earth. He and his 4 companions were crouched at the edge of the opening that held Busy Rain's unseen castle. They did not attempt it till the moon had disappeared. As they crossed the open space, Shay whispered,
I'm afraid I can't find the gate. Too dark to see my landmarks.
Small loss.
Shay saw her dimly doing things with her wand. Out of nothing grew a faint phosphorescence that resolved itself into a row of bars. Cambina pointed the wand at it, the instrument elongated, flexing itself like some tame worm. The tip groped with the lock, inserting itself gently. There was a faint click. The wand withdrew, then poked its end through the bars. Under the night song of the insects there came a faint grate as the bolt slid back. The gate was open. As they tiptoed through, the infinitesimal jingle of the knight's armor sounded to Shay's ears like an earthquake in a kitchenware factory. Cambina pointed. Over their heads on the wall appeared a sentry, visible only as a cloak and hood, glowing with phosphorescence, almost too faint to be visible. The hood swung its black cavity toward them. Cambina pressed her wand, and the sentry froze in that position. Light and music streamed from the window of the great hall. Shay, leading because of his knowledge of the place and the fact that his tread was almost nearly soundless, was heading for the door when he tripped over a huge, hairy leg. With simultaneous grunts, a pair of losels who had been stretched out on the steps rolled to their feet. While the one nearest was fumbling in the dark for his club, Shay drove the épée through the creature's throat. Behind him, he heard the other's club swish up. but the club failed to come down. He looked around and saw the losel, club aloft, frozen to a statue like the sentry. The other losel was expiring with quiet, bubbling noises. Cambina did things with her wand, and the door of the building swung open. There was light and noise within, but no one to see them. Across the corridor in which they stood was the entrance to the great hall, the door slightly ajar. Within, the revelers were too occupied with their grand ball to be watching the door. Shay beckoned the four heads close to his and breathed.
This corridor runs around to the serving entrance.
Are there other doors besides these two?
Shay shook his head.
Then do you, Squire, with Campbell and Cambina, take that entrance. Here, Britomart and I will take our stand. For this is the place where they will naturally come, and we are, I think, the best men-at-arms.
Heads nodded. Shay and the other two stole down the corridor. Just before they reached the service entrance, an imp crossed the corridor from the kitchen with a tray in his hands. He saw them. Campbell bounded forward and cut the imp in two. The bottom half of the imp ran back into the kitchen. There was an instant uproar. The three ran a few steps to the service entrance and flung open the door. Shay got one brief static picture of a room full of magicians and red-lipped women looking at him. Some had their mouths open. Busy Rain sat at one end of the horseshoe facing him, and he thought he recognized Chalmers. Before he could be certain, the photograph came to frenzied life. He turned to face the noise behind. Out of the kitchen boiled a mass of imps and hobgoblins, bearing spits, knives, rolling pins. Shay neatly spitted the first on his epee, dodging counter. The imp leaned backward off the blade and came on again. Behind him, Shay heard the roar of the chapter Campbell's deep war cry and the whack of swords against his shield.
I can handle these.
Her wand darted to and fro, freezing imp after imp. The rest started to run. Shay turned back toward the hall just in time to thrust through the throat a magician trying to roll under Campbell's legs with a knife, while others engaged the knight's attention. The noise was ear-splitting. Campbell filled the door, and at the far end Britomart was doing equally well. Artegall had leaped into the hall and was swinging his great sword with both hands. His temper might be bad, but he was certainly a good man to have around in a rough house. The lights dimmed to negligible red sparks. Cambina cried a spell and waved her wand. The magicians glowed with blue phosphorescence in the dark. The scene became that of a photographic negative, a wild one, with some of the enchanters turning themselves into winged things to flee, others hurling themselves upon the fighters, striking sparks. The whole press at once bore down on Campbell. Shay saw a glowing head fly from his shoulders, and himself thrust past the knight's shield arm against something that gave before his blade. Then he was out in the room. A green mist whirled about him, plucking. A pink flash, and it was gone. Right in front of him, a magician became a monstrous crab. Shay dodged it, clashed weapons with a still human enchanter, and thrust himself through and went down as the falling man grabbed him by both ankles. He was stepped on 4 times before he kicked himself free. Colors, sparks, flashes of light danced around the room. Just ahead, a whole crowd were boiling around Artegall. Shay took one step and found himself confronting Busy Rain in person. Busy Rain's eyes were twice their normal size, with slit pupils like a cat's. For all his venerable appearance, the enchanter was swinging a huge sword as though it were a foot rule. Shay gave back, almost slipping on a spot of blood. Busy Rain came leaping nimbly after, slashing. The big sword, half seen, whirled in a continuous snaky blur. Shay parried back, parried, and parried. The wall was against him. There was no time even for riposte against the demoniac attack. Shay took the last refuge of an outmatched fencer, leaped into a corps-to-corps, and grabbed Busy Rain round the waist with his free arm. The magician seemed made of rubber and piano wire. One hand clawed at Shay's face. Shay ducked and buried his face in Busy Rain's cloak, trying to trip him. The magician fumbled for a dagger. Shay reflected that the weapon was probably poisoned. But just at this moment, Busy Rain was jerked backwards, dragging Shay to his knees after him. Shay threw himself back and up. Then he saw what was the matter with Busy Rain. Around the Archmage's neck was clasped a pair of large, knobby hands. Just that, and nothing more. Around the room above flitted a dozen more pairs of those disembodied hands, swooping at the throats of the enchanters. Shay lunged. But Busy Rain was made of stern stuff. He got the hands loose and his own sword up and came back with a low cut. Shay lunged again. The magician, groggy from that strangling grip, had strength enough left to beat off Shay's remisses and 1-2s. Shay tried a coup and 1-2 and felt his point go home. He held his lunge, stabbing and stabbing. Down went Busy Rain. Shay looked around. The windows of the hall were jammed with the bats and owls and things into which the magicians had changed themselves. They were beaten. The knobby hands clustered around them, tearing off wings and wringing necks with fine impartiality. The lights flared up again. It was all over. Dead and dying monsters about the great hall changed back into men. Campbell, Artigal, and Britomart picked themselves up from the floor, slowly and with effort. Cambina drooped against the service door, almost fainting. Artigal's deep voice boomed.
Ha! Lives one yet?
Shay turned to see him kick over a table and swing back the big, blood-dripping sword. He gave a leap and clutched the arm in time.
Thank you, Harold.
Said Charles from the foot where the table had been. Florimel was beside him. He was squeezing the neck of a bottle in both hands. The large joints of those hands were familiar. Shay realized that the disembodied pairs that had wrought such havoc among the enchanters were outsized copies of his partners.
Nice work, Doc.
To Article, he said,
Don't. He's on our team.
Chalmers gave a hand to Florimel.
You observe the improvement in my technique, although, goodness gracious, I didn't expect the hands to be quite as efficacious as that.
He looked around the room, where nearly half the corpses showed marks of strangulation.
Yay! Good job.
Okay.
That was quite a battle.
Don't
Thank
you
you.
have more? I've got.
That's it.
Oh, we're not doing the
That's
other
the
three.
break.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna next week we
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry.
I told